Okay, it is 9:45, and Claire, are we ready with the streaming and everything?
Yes, we are live and streaming.
Oh, hang on a second. Okay, I'm ready now. Claire, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. I had all of my sound turned off from the Monday night meeting and had to go fix all of that in order to run this meeting. All right, I'm back and I'm ready. I'm going to call Committee of the Whole to order for April 6, 2022. We are still hearing our committee meetings virtually. And we have the participation guide that is posted. If you want to join this meeting to provide comment virtually, you go to the city website and go to agendas, find this meeting and click on the link to get in. You can also always leave us a voicemail at 406-552-6012, or you can email us. The email address is council@ci.missoula.mt.us. Thank you. If you want to take that screen down and do roll call for attendance, please.
All right, 1 second, everyone. All right, roll call for Committee of the Whole on April 6th. Stacy Anderson?
Present.
Mirta Becerra?
Present.
Daniel Carlino?
Present.
John Contos? Oh, I see him. John Contos.
He's present.
Present.
Just muted.
Right. Jordan Hess?
Present.
Gwen Jones?
Present.
Kristen Jordan?
Present.
Mike Nugent?
He's absent this morning.
Not yet. All right. Jennifer Savage?
Present.
Amber Sherrill?
Present.
Sandra Vasica?
Present.
Heidi West?
Present.
And that's everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. We have minutes from the March 16th, 2022 meeting to approve. Were there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. And I will call for public comment on items not on the agenda. If anyone who is attending wants to raise their hand to give public comment on items not on the agenda, please raise your hand now. I'm not seeing anyone, so we'll go forward with the agenda. Okay, the first item of business is we have Emily Harris Shears, I believe, to present on this. It is a fiscal sponsorship with the Missoula Community Foundation to act as a funding conduit for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So Emily, are you here and can you unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning.
Emily, do you need anyone else to be promoted from your group?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm going to assume you can see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thanks for having me. Good morning. I'm Emily Harris Shears. I'm the Housing Policy Specialist with Community Development, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm really excited to share some work that we've been working on around building revenue for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And specifically today, I'm here to bring a contract forward to establish a fiscal sponsorship with Missoula Community Foundation. But I thought I would give some brief background about the capitalization and revenue building work that my team, which includes me, Aubrey Godby, and our practicum student Paige Furness, as well as our leadership, have been working on for the last few months. So just a grounding in our goals for capitalization is to generate revenue from a broad range of approaches that help us meet our capitalization goal of $10 million within the first 5 years of adoption of the trust fund. We are hoping to create and expand partnerships and build awareness of both a place to call home strategies and just support moving the community toward housing solutions by our revenue plan. I'm going to take a quick sip. We also hope to develop meaningful partnerships that increase opportunities to create and preserve housing for Missoulians. And one of our big goals is just to help socialize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund so that people know that it's available and around, and that all Missoulians can feel like they have a stake in participating in meeting its goal, so that we're welcoming and have capacity and the opportunity to accept gifts of all sizes. And we're really building on our strongest values outlined in the housing policy of diversity, innovation, collaboration, and achievability. So to do that, we've identified a number of strategies that we'll be implementing over probably the next 18 months or so. And that includes exploring a voluntary real estate transfer tax, developing a partnership with housing professionals, including realtors, mortgage brokers, insurance agents, and others who would voluntarily invest a percentage of their revenue that they're making from sales of homes or transactions of homes into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then building on community engagement strategies, which include business partnerships and really focusing on workforce housing opportunities, band and other community partnerships like a Paddleheads partnership that will be starting this summer. So look out for that information soon. And then also building on private philanthropy relationships. So exploring an endowment partnership with the Missoula Community Foundation so that we have a in perpetuity endowment that will be available to draw from. The ability to apply for grants, and then dedicated partnerships like this Missoula Gives partnership and fiscal sponsorship, which I'll give more detail on. So I also just wanted to highlight that what I shared in the last slide is an ambitious work plan. It could be a work plan all on its own, but we have a commitment to achieving this capitalization goal, and we plan to do it over the next 18 months or so to initiate these initial strategies through work groups and partnerships and really collaborating with the community. So we don't anticipate doing it all alone. We really look forward to drawing on expertise of partners and champions of this work. And so I want to focus right now on Missoula Gives and the contract that's before you to consider authorizing. So Missoula Gives is a 26-hour online celebration of the Missoula community. It's scheduled this year for May 5th and 6th. It's an opportunity for us to introduce the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the broad community. And to participate, we do have to have a 501c3 or nonprofit status. And given our placement in the city, we are not eligible for that. So we worked with Marcy Allen at the Missoula Community Foundation to establish a fiscal sponsorship, which is what the contract outlines. It's a one-year contract that allows us to participate in the Missoula Gives opportunity this year and then explore ongoing fiscal sponsorship if we want to. That would allow us to apply for grants and other opportunities. And the contract is pretty standard. It'll allow us to use all of our established policies and procedures of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and defaults our approval back to the Oversight Committee and to the Council in our structure. And one thing just to note is that there is an 8% admin charge for gifts that are received for their processing and for their admin work, which is standard to what we draw for our admin work as well. So that is kind of the bulk of the contract. I can answer any questions, and the motion is on the screen.
Thank you, Emily. If you want to take, if you want to stop sharing your screen. And I was going to say, just to start off with, I love that you guys have created a funding plan. It's ambitious, but this is also an ambitious community. And we'll keep in touch. And I think at key times you should come in and give us updates on how it's going and highlight future opportunities, et cetera. So I just wanted to note that first of all. Let's go to questions. John Contos. You're muted, John. There you
Got
go.
it. Yeah, just need to find the button. I just had a question on the 8%. Could you run that by me again? It seemed a little high.
Yeah, they take in 8% admin fee for the gifts that are received for processing that. And that is lower than their typical fiscal sponsorship since it's a one-time event. Typically, I believe it's between 10 and 15%, depending on the relationship of the sponsorship. But since they're really just acting as a pass-through to us, that they have a standard 8% charge.
I see. Thank you.
Heidi West.
I love Missoula Gives. I think I've done it every year since it started. And I'm working on organizing one right now for the Lowell PTA. And I know that it's, imperative that you have lots of peer-to-peer fundraisers to really have a successful campaign. And so I was wondering, who you're envisioning filling that role.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we definitely hope to ask the Oversight Committee members to share with their networks. We plan to give them a more detailed capitalization overview in their meeting next week. And you also, Heidi. And then we plan to do our own peer work. And as soon as we have the contract signed, we'll be able to watch all of their educational videos and plan out our full strategy. But we've started to plan some of that out. And I expect to ask champions of the fund who've done outreach to us, or we've been building relationships with, to share with their networks as well.
Yeah, I'm a little bummed just because I'm already fully committed to a different campaign. So I'm like,
Sure.
Oh no, I wish I mean, it's about a month away. So
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do. So thank you.
Oh, understand. And I think it will also just give us really good insight into future opportunities and what we need to do next year. So
Oh yeah, it's super fun. I love it. So it's a good tool for our community.
Great, thank you. And Amber Sherrill.
Yeah, thanks. I think Heidi kind of asked one of my questions, but I'm curious, did I miss this? This will be just kind of the fiscal sponsor. I understand what that is in a pass through, but is there the ability to give, did you mention an endowment for the trust fund? Did I mishear that? Would you speak to that?
You didn't mishear that. It's a strategy that we're still developing and exploring, but we are talking with Marcy and Missoula Community Foundation about what that would look like. And it would be a separate strategy to these more kind of one-time events.
Great, thanks.
Great. Okay. And yeah, if you guys are taking your hands down as you speak, because I don't seem to have that capacity right now. Okay. Amber, your hand's back up?
I was just going to say that I'd be happy to make the recommended motion.
Okay, thank you. That motion is in order. I've got a couple of other hands we'll go through before we call for public comment. Stacy Anderson?
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I want to echo what Ms. West said. I am thrilled that we are participating in this. I think Missoula Gives is an amazing way for the community to join together and really, with small donations, add up to really have an impact. And I think that many of our fellow Missoulians recognize that housing is a worthwhile endeavor to try to do what we can for those who are, have a little bit to give. I want to bring up the point about the 8% fee, and that is absolutely within reason. I do fundraising in my other job quite a bit and work a lot with fiscal sponsors, and I've seen anywhere from 10 to 15%. So 8 is really reasonable, and it is to cover all of the back end processing. And because it's a 501c3, you have to have that already IRS designation to be able to receive a tax deductible gift that requires paperwork and things like that. That is just not easy for us as a municipality to really work on. So I'm so excited that we're partnering. And I do also want to emphasize what Chairwoman Jones said about having a fundraising plan. I mean, I think this is an ambitious program, and it can have a lot of impact, and we need to be making sure that we're not leaving any funding source unturned or untapped. And small donations in a community this size really cannot add up to have a big impact. And it's also about creating momentum, and I think that this is an excellent way to do that. So we will continue to kind of utilize all the tools in our tool belt, but this is a really exciting one, and I think also brings a really great awareness to the program and what impacts it can be having in our community. But understanding that the lion's share will be coming from opportunities that we on the municipal side can generate. So really hats off to this creative thinking and participation in Missoula Gives.
Great, thank you. Ms. Becerra?
Thank you. I too just wanted to voice my support for this. In my fundraising experience for the downtown partnership, we used Missoula Gives, and one of the greatest benefits is community awareness. And I completely agree that even small contributions throughout the community show the kind of community support that sometimes larger funders and larger donors are looking for before they make a larger contribution. So, I would encourage all of us to disseminate this information, contribute what you can, because sometimes those little bits of money that come in can signal to a much larger donor that there is community support for the organization. And I also wanted to say that, that 8% seems like a lot, but really there's a lot of moving parts to what the Community Foundation does in order to put these events on. And also a lot of the money that they collect through all the other participating organizations goes into a fund that then they later provide grants for other organizations in the community. So it's a bit of a revolving fund that they have for the community. So fully supportive of it. And thank you, Emily, for working on this.
Great. Okay, Jennifer Savage, and then we need to get moving on to our next item, but go ahead, Jennifer.
I just wanted to say briefly that I agree with all of my colleagues that the 8% is pretty standard and is actually kind of low. I think if you want to bring money into, say, the University of Montana, the fee is anywhere between 6 and 45%. So there are lots higher fees out there. And I also just wanted to give a big call out to the Missoula Community Foundation. I think it is an absolutely vital organization for our community, and I think that we should be honored to participate.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion that is in order. I will call for public comment. If anyone wants to provide public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, we will have a roll call vote on this, Claire.
right. Voting on the fiscal sponsorship with the community, Missoula Community Foundation. Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
Daniel Carlino,
Yes.
John Contos,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Kristen Jordan.
Yes.
Jennifer Savage,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vasika,
Yes.
Heidi West,
Yes.
and that was unanimous with 11 yeses.
Thank you. So that can go onto the consent agenda for Monday night. I will not be at the Monday night meeting. I'll be out of town, but I hope that people still praise this item, even if it's on the consent agenda, and shine a light on it and message it a little bit, because it's really important to get that message out. All righty, now we're going to move on to our second item, which is the Operation Shelter update. This is a continuation from 3 weeks ago. And Emily Armstrong is here. And Emily outlined for us the plan for today, but I believe you're going to complete your presentation. And then we've got quite a few stakeholders who want to speak. And I'll let you reference this also, but my understanding is that we're actually going to have a meeting in May in Committee of the Whole on security issues regarding our shelter update. So I just want everyone to be aware of it, that there will be a specific meeting regarding security in May. So today I really want to focus on everything else, because frankly, we have so much information to cover and we did not get very far down the road 3 weeks ago. So we are going to be focusing on that today. So Emily, are you able to unmute yourself? And
Yeah, I am. Thanks, Gwen.
there we go. Good morning.
Good morning, morning council. I am Emily Armstrong, she, her. I'm the Houseless Initiative Specialist with CPDI with the city. And Claire, I have a few people in the attendees list that I would love for you to promote if possible. So we have Anna Nillis, April Seat, Casey Gannon, Jill Bonney, Jim Hicks, John Petchoff, and then the Missoula Police Department, which is Captain Rossling.
All right, I'll work on that.
Thank you so much. Come with a posse. Okay, I'm going to pull up my presentation and share my screen. Okay, can you all see that? Awesome. Okay, so yeah, as Gwen mentioned, the plan for today is to follow up on all of the content that we didn't get to cover when I was here last 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm just going to overview. There's a little bit of content that I'm just going to overview again. I think it got a little bit lost in the conversation the first time, and I want to make sure that it's part of this collective conversation on Operation Shelter. So I'll go through the slides myself, but then I have this wonderful group of humans that I just named to help talk to all these projects and the ones that they own. So after I go through the slides, we'll have a few minutes for many of those folks to share a few extra words, give a little bit of extra context on the projects that they are leading or are a part of, and how they are intersecting with this work. And then we'll have time for plenty of council questions after that as needed. So let's see, here we go. Okay. So I kept a lot of the slides in from last time just to kind of quickly move through as a refresher of where we were. So we kind of covered the background of Operation Shelter. This is the grouping of topics that we'll cover today. So we'll talk through the emergency winter shelter, community care team. We talked through really briefly last time, so I'll just kind of skim through that presentation. And then we do have someone from that group to speak a little bit more to it at the end. The authorized camping site, the temporary safe outdoor space expansion, and then increased collaboration. So this was kind of the background of our timeline. We talked through the continuum, the spectrum of shelter options that we are continuously working to build out to really meet people where they are along their housing journey and their housing process, and make sure that we have responses that meet all different levels of need. And then I'll dive into the emergency winter shelter. So this is a project operated by the Poverello Center. It's a project of the city in partnership with the county, with some additional funding support from the Human Resource Council through their Emergency Solutions Grant. We have been doing emergency winter shelter for a few years. It started as a much smaller operation in partnership with the Poverello Center and Salvation Army and various other partners at the table. And then when COVID hit, we needed a much larger facility for social distancing, and there were fewer spaces for folks to be. And so that's when we started using the Johnson Street Community Center. So last year and this year, we've been at the Johnson Street Community Center. That facility has had 24/7 operations because of the need for daytime warming, given the pandemic, and then the just increased need for that we found after running that operation last year. It was last year open through March, and we discovered a need to keep it open longer. And so this year we had it open through April flexibly as the weather dictates. And we just announced last week it will be closing on April 18th this year. So 1 week from, or 2 weeks from, wow, what day is it? Wednesday. I just got back from a trip, so I'm totally thrown off. Two and a half weeks. It's on the 18th. Monday, so that we can get through the weekend, and that way when the shelter closes for when it would typically be cleaning on Monday, it'll just be closed for the season. It has access to bathrooms and showers and hot meals and a variety of other services. Connection to the Missoula coordinated entry system. The homeless outreach team works really closely with residents who are there. It gives them a kind of a elongated touch point with those folks to do more in-depth work on their housing supports and housing problem solving. And of course has COVID safety measures. That's a big reason for using that facility. So just some brief outcomes. And there's a little blurb over here if you want to just kind of skim through that as I'm talking, an anecdotal story that I think is really important to partner with the numbers. But these numbers, I will also say, were taken at the beginning of March, so they may have shifted a little bit since then, but 98% of folks that are served at the emergency winter shelter are extremely low income, which is at or below 30% of area median income. There were 567 unduplicated individuals served as of February 28th, so that number is likely a little bit higher at this point. On the busiest night of the year, which was February 23rd, there were 117 people sleeping at the shelter, and on the lowest night, it was 45 people, and that was in the very beginning of November when the shelter first opened. So that's kind of an overview of that operation this year. You can see here, there are many individuals who really value the use of the emergency winter shelter. It's a project that is truly intended to keep people alive through the cold winter months in Montana. And we've seen a lot of success with that. We haven't lost anyone due to the elements this year or last year. And so it's just a really critical partnership between the city and the county and the Poverello Center as our operational partner. So then I'll move on to the community care team. Like I said, I'll go through this one a little bit more quickly because I did touch on it in the last presentation, but this is a team that we created as we kind of created Operation Shelter in an effort to create a staffing team that could kind of meet these new spaces the way we were building them out. So this is a mobile kind of roving team of providers. It has two tenancy support specialists, one of whom is intended to work with FUSE clients, which are the most vulnerable, the highest prioritized on our in our coordinated entry system. And there's a little blurb about that next slide. A registered nurse and hopefully a peer support specialist, although that element has been a little bit challenging to staff up just because of all of the supports and wraparound that we want to provide for folks who are peer supports. It's been operating in, I think, almost full capacity, a manager, two tenancy supports, and a nurse for 2 or 3 months at this point. And Anna, maybe you can speak to that when you say a few notes about it. And spends a lot of time visiting different sites. So they spend a lot of time at the authorized camping site. They visit the Johnson Street Community Center. Sometimes they go to the temporary safe outdoor space or other places around town based on where clients are, or really just in an effort to build relationship and build trust and meet folks where they are with medical and social and really client-focused care. So outcomes, here we go with FUSE, frequent users of systems engagement. So like I said, regular visits to various sites, and you can see a little bit as far as numbers there on how many meetings folks have had and how many residents they're connected to. Already, these numbers again were as of late February, early March, and they had already handed out 40+ wound kits, which is a really critical basic medical need for folks who are living outside. And they have only continued to build those relationships. And I can speak anecdotally, they're a really really integrated piece of our outreach team at the authorized camping site, really keeping an eye on resident needs and site needs and what's going on out there, and helping kind of translate that back to those of us who are able to respond with infrastructure supports, or kind of shifting as we learn. And again, an anecdotal comment at the bottom if you want to take just a quick moment to read through that. I think these stories are really important as we balance it out with more numerical outcomes. All right. So then the authorized campsite itself. So this is a new site that we created in response to the need for a place for folks to be safely camping. We saw last year a really high increase last spring in folks who are camping in urban areas, camping in public right-of-ways, and needed to create some sort of response to that. So this is our response. It opened on January 18th of this year. So it's been open for just a few months. It has 40 camping spots. And it has 24/7 security from Rogers International. It's low barrier, so anyone is allowed to be there as long as they can be safe, kind, and respectful. Pets are allowed. It has bathrooms and trash and firewood, and then a lot of supplies from partner providers as folks bring them in. There's sometimes food donations or clothes donations. There are pet supplies and smudging kits and a variety of just really fabulous resources that partners have been willing to donate and offer to the residents who live there. Facilities management infrastructure is done by the county, and there's a connection to the continuum of houseless services and the coordinated entry system through many of the outreach staff who visit there a few days a week. The community care team, as I mentioned, visits the site pretty regularly and is building relationships and rapport, and then other visits from a wide variety of outreach teams who have committed to spending some time there. So outcomes so far, like I said, we are pretty early into this operation, but we've noticed since opening definitely a decrease in urban camping in other areas of the community. We are working on establishing processes to better track number of residents served. The management structure at the site is still in development as far as the management staff and full-time staff out there. So that's been something that we've been trying to build out since opening, is staff who can better track outcomes and better respond to resident needs on site. Since opening, as of the collection of these numbers, which again was end of February, early March, there had been only 14 calls to Missoula Police, and 50% were just calls for extra parole or officer advice, as opposed to responding to an actual crisis in action. 6 total calls were to Missoula Fire Department since opening and mobile support team. So that's combined, 6 calls to MFD and MST combined. So again, quite low. And then, like I mentioned earlier, access to clothes donations, smudging supplies, harm reduction kits, pet food. We have just really, really wonderful partners who have all kind of rallied around the site. And when we run out of cat food or dog food, we just reach out to Humane Society and they come and deliver more. And it's really a fabulous partnership between so many providers across the community. We are hoping to establish a more consistent resident feedback process and are working on building out other policies related to appeals and grievance and feedback and all of those elements. So like I said, it's still an early project. It's still in development. We're learning as we go and are very open to feedback as we hear it and can adapt. The temporary safe outdoor space is a project that was already in existence, but we are working on expanding it. So that's the piece that's tied to Operation Shelter. So this is a project operated by Hope Rescue Mission. It opened in December of 2020 as a COVID response and has proven to be extremely successful. It has right now 20 tent sites. We will be expanding it to pallet shelters. So pallet shelters are hard-sided structures that connect to utilities. They have access to heat and cooling, air conditioning. They're bed bug resistant. They have all these features. They're designed for exactly this use. And we have purchased, in partnership with the county, 30 of them. And we are in the process of locating and building out a new space to be able to move the current site to a new site and move away from tents and into pallet shelters. So it's a partnership with United Way, Missoula County, and the city. And then, of course, lots of partners who are, again, providing, supporting all kinds of programming and different elements to really bolster the project. Right now, it's 20 sites, as I mentioned. With the expansion, we have 30 pallets. A few of them may be used for like administrative purposes. So the expansion will have 25 to 30 shelter units. And this site is really intended for people who are taking steps forward in their housing journey, whether that's working on getting an ID or working on getting a voucher or whatever the step in the process is, getting connected with case management. It may be really early, it may be far along, but it's really intended for folks who are motivated to take those next steps forward. And because of that, it has really strong wraparound services to support folks in that process. So really high level of case management. Connected to the Missoula Coordinated Entry System, and like I said, expansion to hard-sided pallet shelters. So this is a pallet shelter, just for reference. It's a little decorated, but it's just kind of a hard-sided, like I said, hard-sided shelter that meets the need. It has windows and opportunity to kind of decorate it and personalize it. So as of, these numbers are as of December 2021, and Jim, maybe you can speak to more updated numbers, or April when you present, but 86 unduplicated individuals had been served at this site. So that's December 21 was a year from opening. It opened in December 2020. So over the course of that year, 86 unduplicated individuals, 26 had transitioned to stable housing from the temporary safe outdoor space. And I know for a fact that that number is higher since then. 15 individuals had obtained photo ID with the help of staff, and that is an incredibly difficult process. It requires a lot of paperwork that folks typically don't have and a lot of hoops to jump through, and so is one of the pieces that TSOS staff are extremely helpful with, along with many of the other providers in our system. And it's a critical first step in taking any other steps in a housing journey. And then 8 individuals had been connected to case management, and many others were already connected to case management before moving on site. Okay, so the last thing I'll speak to is just the increased collaboration. And this has been kind of, it's not a big project with a picture or anything like that. It's kind of the behind the scenes work that's going on. Our team is really focused on building collaboration across providers, across city departments, really trying to increase how we're communicating together and how we're addressing these issues. It's become very evident. I think we all know that these challenges are not, they don't exist in a silo, they don't exist in a vacuum, they require support and attention from a wide variety of stakeholders. And so we're really trying to build that system and respond efficiently and meet the needs of all the departments and the partners who are connected to it. So we have an urban camping new process and group since last year around this time that kind of formed in spring and summer and fall of last year, and is now has a process and is kind of operating pretty efficiently. So there's a group made up of quite a few city departments and the homeless outreach team, and there's an incident action plan that kind of details how we respond to urban camping crises when they come up in town. And there's a regular meeting for these folks to address any new camps that come up, as well as kind of email communication and an email process to address within a timely manner any new camps that arise, both from the camp resident standpoint, trying to reach out, do some outreach, make sure they have supports and make sure they understand what's going on and try to get them connected to a better option, and from the city response standpoint of cleaning up parks and making sure we have environmental quality and housing quality across the community. And then we have a community outreach team. This is not new, but it's continued to grow over the past few years. So this is providers across the system and outside the system. There's a closed version and an open version. The closed version is really intended to talk about and address and support folks who are unsheltered in Missoula. And then the open version is intended to do that in more of a broad capacity, talking about how we can better collaborate around resources and processes for folks who are unsheltered in Missoula. And so this team also meets pretty regularly and has just become stronger and stronger in their approaches and collaborations, and is really involved in the urban camping response and also many other responses within the coordinated entry system and beyond it. And then the authorized campsite situation response group, this one is specifically for the authorized campsite, but again, a wide group of stakeholders. It's city, county, it's partnership, Rogers International with security, the mobile support team, code compliance, police. Really, given that we are still working on building out our staffing and our management at that site and our operations capacity, it's a team that really works to address issues as they arise, create policies, mitigate situations about warnings or outs at the site. So it's kind of our ad hoc operations group, and again, a really collaborative, communicative group that tries to address things. We meet weekly and address things in that meeting, and then also in the interim as things come up. And those are just a few. We have many other pre-existing collaboration efforts and many other new ones that have come up in the last years. We really try to bolster how we work within the city and beyond the city, staff with partners and providers, and try to be more collective in our responses and our approaches to supporting our neighbors. So just a quick note on spring and summer 2022. This is a topic of conversation I've heard a lot lately, kind of what do we expect with the winter shelter closing and the warm temperatures. I want to be clear that often folks have this notion that in the springtime or in the summertime, more people are in Missoula, the situation is worse. And the reality is really that more people are seen in Missoula because they're outside and it's warmer. These folks are here year round. They're people that we're trying to work with year round. And it may be more visible in Missoula, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those folks are new to our system. Of course, there are people passing through. There are different folks that come through more in the summer than in the winter. But many of these folks are people that we are working to support and working to find resources for year round. And while it may seem like the problem gets so much bigger in the summer, it's just really not the reality of the situation. It's just the reality of the seasons. So like I mentioned, the emergency winter shelter will close on April 18th, and we are in conversations again about all of that urban camping, how we're going to address camps if and as they arise. We have everyone mentioned on that last slide involved in that. We have that incident action plan process. We have regular meeting spaces set up to address it, and then are working really closely with partners to figure that out as well. We also have the new authorized campsite, which we didn't have last year. And so we're excited to be able to have that resource. And it is quite full most of the time already. So we're trying to work through what that will look like, and work always to partner with all of our other providers, shelter providers, and providers with other resources to housing problem solve and meet people's needs. But we are in a very different place this year than we were last spring to be able to meet the needs of spring and summer and folks who are coming more outdoors, just because of the increased collaboration and because of the new Operation Shelter efforts, because of the presence of Rogers. We have a lot of new resources this year that we didn't have last year. So we can expect, spring and summer will present new challenges, as it always does, but it's nothing that we aren't ready to anticipate or that we aren't already planning for. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Emily. Lots of amazing information in there. I see a couple of hands raised. What I would like to do first, though, for the sake of continuity, is have Emily go through the stakeholders who have joined this meeting to also provide information. So Jennifer and Kristen, I'm going to hold off on questions. We're going to go through everyone that is going to provide substantive information, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions to further dive into topics. So just sit tight. All right, Emily, back to you.
Thanks, Gwen. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start us off with, I'm trying to go kind of in the order that we presented while also keeping an eye on time and knowing a few people have to scoot early. But I think we'll start with Jill to talk a little bit more about the emergency winter shelter operations from the Poverello perspective.
Hi, everybody. I think we had a really successful winter shelter this year. Really, I hate to say zero, but not many neighborhood complaints. We had people show up to our neighborhood meetings, but not many. And most of the time they were positive comments, which is great from the neighborhood perspective. Also, we always had a place for people to stay. We didn't ever fill to the point where people didn't have a location indoors to sleep. And also, this is the second winter in a row that is far, I keep waiting for someone to tell me I'm wrong, and I'm glad they haven't, but I haven't heard of anyone dying due to the cold and being outside in the last 2 winters. So I think that's a huge win for winter shelter and us having that at the Johnson Street shelter, where we're able to serve as many people as necessary. We are, working with staff, and the homeless outreach team is working with our guests to prepare them for our closing on April 18th, give them the options that are out there. The homeless outreach team will continue to work with people. We'll, provide them with essential gear that they need to be able to survive through the summer. But we know that the weather in the summer is a lot easier to deal with in Montana than the winter. And then also just a quick statement on security. The Poverello Center, City of Missoula, Rogers International, and then also a couple of members of Missoula Police Department meet weekly around security that is in the neighborhood of the Poverello Center and also the Johnson Street shelter. And we, have a really good collaboration in those meetings. I think we've been able to discuss progress and collaborate on any needed changes that have needed to happen. we will continue to do our best to make sure that anyone seeking our services is treated with dignity and respect. Also, we feel like so far the personnel from Rogers International is coming from a place of relationship building. And we've really appreciated that. And also they're not, we have asked them to not provide services in our building unless our staff specifically asks them to come in. So we do not have security in our buildings. It's just in the neighboring areas. So we just want to remind people that individuals experiencing houselessness are more likely to be the victim of a crime than they are to commit one. And also we just continue to take the safety of our staff and our guests and our donors and our neighbors very seriously. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Jill. And before we go on to the next stakeholder, I just did have one quick follow-up, which you referenced that to the best of our knowledge, there were no deaths this last winter of our unhoused population. Could you just provide a little bigger context? I know that over the years, there have been deaths in the winter time, and I've gone to the memorial services on and off, but I don't know if you have the data in front of you, but in general, what have we seen in the past compared to this year and this last year? Because to me, that is just a huge improvement. And could you speak to a little bit more to that?
Yeah, every year we see individuals who are living without homes pass away. But until the last 2 winters, there would be a handful of individuals who we would find out have passed away due to being unsheltered and, for lack of better words, freezing to death outside. So really that has been our mission, is to keep people alive. That's our biggest priority. And so just the fact that, people still pass away that don't have a home or a house to call their home, but they're not dying in the cold on the street. And we just feel that's really important.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to you, Emily.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. Thanks for being here. I think we will move on to Anna to talk about the community care team.
Hello, everyone. Emily did share a lot already, so I'll be pretty brief. But since the information that Emily shared, we have increased our encounters with individuals at the authorized camping site, and we've been running as a full team for the last month. People were in different trainings, and so we're finally all together and just focusing on being out there together, building relationships with the individuals out there as we are newer to the scene. And we have gotten a lot of good feedback about having RNs on our team. We actually have a second RN who is a professor at MSU as well, who's joined the team, who goes out on Fridays. And so we're just really excited about the opportunity. We've provided a lot of wound care. We're working on SOAR applications, which is for Social Security income. We've had people attend voucher briefings, assisted with getting IDs, did discharge planning with the hospital, connected people to bed management, connected people back to partnership, connected people to dental care. So definitely seeing a lot of positives and getting people wrapped back up into primary care, and also already seeing some diversion from utilizing the emergency department room. So we're happy to be out there and continue to grow as a team and take feedback from residents on how we can best serve them.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Moving right along, let's have Jim and April if you want to speak about TSOS and the expansion.
All right, thank you. Be glad to do so. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and City Council. We're just really happy to see the outcomes from the TSOS. Emily gave you some numbers. They have grown in the sense of we have served 110 people, and 49% of those have exited out of HIMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. either because they've been housed, a couple have gone into inpatient treatment, some have self-resolved through full-time employment, and others have been able to be reunited with healthy family systems and go back to a different location or join their families. So we're really happy with that. It's been a very sharp but appreciated learning curve, and to learn is the only way we can really go forward. There's been 11 now that's been in case management, and 20 that have obtained their IDs and birth certificates and the proper SSI documents. So because of that, that's why we're looking forward to that expansion that Emily was talking about. It would probably move, this is not official, this is me. I would like it to move from a temporary safe outdoor space to a transitional safe outdoor space, helping people understand it's still not permanent. It's for those that want to move forward. We have markers for them to move forward. The average stay has gone down to 90 days, and we're willing to work with anybody longer than that, as long as they are going forward. That's our whole thing. It's not a race. It's trying to get them to move forward. So we really want them to, through the networking, through the incredible collaboration that we have, able them to move into housing and to be socially stable as they go forward in their lives. We've talked about compassionate enforcement. We want to have these wraparound services to help them, guide them, walk with them through this transition. What we've found is not only do the unhoused have a marred identity about who they are, our community has a marred identity about who they are. So trying to bridge that gap as well, to see that we, at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we can have a bigger point of view of how we operate. Just let me mention just real quickly, Rogers International has been a key point a team member in this. Their de-escalation, when that has been needed, has been there. If there's been any glitches, just a memo or a sit-down meeting has taken care of those things. They build relationships with our partners and with our clients on site. Actually, we've used them to help keep, lack of a better term, looky-loos or community members who come on to say, actually, you're trespassing. This is private property. You can't come and look around. So they've been helpful in that aspect as well. We're just really happy to see the progress that's been, and I mean, I could go on with stories because that's the best thing is when you see somebody that's actually lived at Reserve Street for 6 years, a few days ago get their own house. I mean, that's why we do what we do, helping people move forward. So again, thank you to all the partners that have helped us in this endeavor.
Thanks, Jim. And I love your phrasing of how this population has a marred view of themselves as well as the community and how to correct that. So anyway, thanks for that messaging there. Okay, Emily, back to you.
Thank you. April, I saw you come off mute for a minute. I wanted to open it up if you want to say something.
So I do want to share that we've housed 39 people since 2020. And right now we are full. We have 30 on the wait list. And I just want to share the success and how we've been able to do that. I know case management, they are just overwhelmed with the amount of clients that they have to take care of with where we're at. But I love the fact that we have 3 certified peer support specialists that are on site, and we're going to be hiring a 4th. And the best part about that is we get to collaborate and help that case management, help these folks walk forward with just the things that they wouldn't necessarily understand or know how to navigate. We're able to walk alongside of them through that process. And so it's just been really great to see our community come together and all the agencies and organizations and how well we've been able to work together to see some real impact in people's lives. So I really wanted to share that, and being able to work one-on-one with these folks and giving them a place of security where they're no longer in this area of being in survival mode. They can relax. And then when they have that opportunity to feel safe, now it's like, how can I change? What new I need to do? So I just love the fact that we're able to be there with them to walk through that process. And speaking into security, I think that everybody deserves to feel safe. We transitioned these folks from one area, and they weren't all understanding of what we wanted to do, but now that they see that we really want to keep them safe, having security there has been amazing, because they're not there just to show force or anything like that. Like everyone said, they are building community and relationships, and it also helps us as staff members to be able to know when we're not there, it still is secure, and those folks that are staying there are still accountable to the rules and the agreements that they have signed. So the accountability piece is huge, but they've just been terrific at relationship building and really protecting the folks that we're serving from the ones that want to come in and, like Jim said, either looky-loo or share a negative opinion. So I just, thank you.
Great. Thanks, April. Good to see you. And thank you, Jim, also. Emily?
All right. Thank you both so much. Our last little mini presentation will be Captain Rosling and John Petroff, just to speak to the law enforcement and then the first responder kind of interaction and collaboration with all of the work that we're doing.
I guess I'll jump in first. I guess our primary role from the police department perspective, as far as the authorized campsite goes, is just trying to deal with some of the overflow that happens from people that have been either put on outs from the authorized campsite or come there and come to that area and find that they, it's full or they can't use a facility. So we're trying to stay on top of, people camping in their vehicles in that area, or setting up tents in the areas adjacent to the campsite. I can tell you that the trend has been, we've seen a reduction of about 50 calls per month per site. So that's the Johnson Street site. We're down about 50 plus calls from this time last year. Poverello, the same. Obviously, the authorized campsite wasn't in service last year at this time, but for the month of March, we had about 22 calls directly to the authorized campsite. We generally don't go inside the authorized campsite unless we're called there, and that's only for criminal activity. Rogers security pretty much handles the rest of that kind of stuff. So that's just pretty much what we're trying to stay on top of. A lot of the calls for complaints about garbage or vehicles piling up outside of the authorized campsite are not going through 911. A lot of those are coming either directly to me or Charmel at Code Compliance. So we try to get on those as quickly as possible to keep the business owners down there as happy as possible with the way it looks and having parking and access to their businesses. So
thank you. Who else did we have, Emily?
We have John.
Hello, John Petroff with the Missoula Fire Department mobile support team. And I kind of represent mobile support team a lot of times on these meetings, and also just the fire department operations crews. So I guess I just like to highlight the increase in communication that's happened amongst all these projects that have been happening. There hasn't always been really an open communication with the fire department, especially like operations crews, and the mobile support team's still pretty new. So we've been able to do that since the beginning. But I guess, one thing that we've seen that's really positive is the opportunity to be solo dispatched to a lot of these places via phone call, which is something that was asked for by the community of, not sending law enforcement or fire or EMS if it wasn't criminal or a EMS call. And that's something we've been able to do with all of these projects with the ACS and Johnson Street and TSOS and all of that. So I guess that's something that is just really positive. We're able to offer something to the clients that's less traumatizing, better service, and then try to come up with other solutions other than jail and ED as we kind of are hoping for. So I just think it's really important that, we keep working and supporting each other like we are. And I think that's been something that, all these projects have done for the city. And yeah, it's been great collaborative effort amongst everybody.
You.
I think that's it for all of our content. Thanks everyone, all of our partners for being here and presenting. I do want to just make one more quick comment that Operation Shelter is just one of the initiatives that Reaching Home and our program and office leads and is working on. There are many others. We lead the entire coordinated entry system. We're working on technical assistance programs, the Trinity Navigation Center. So I just want to make sure we're also contextualizing all of the work, and all of the partners who just spoke are also working on dozens of other projects and programs to support the same population. So while Operation Shelter is really important and gets a lot of attention, it's just part of the larger landscape of work that's happening.
Thanks. I have some questions, but I'm going to hold off on those because I think other people might ask them. So, and I want that to happen. But I did have one clarifying question before we go to the queue of questions, just so that I'm clear in my mind. We have the mobile support team, the community care team, but then I believe the Poverello also has the HOT team. And the mobile support team goes out when they are called, typically for when there's a crisis or an issue that has arisen. Community care team is really going out visiting, I think focusing on medical intervention, trying to get more proactive medical interventions so that things are going in a good direction instead of being more reactive. But if maybe Jill could speak to this, a little bit more clarification as to the HOT team, just so that I have it all clear in my mind, because we got a lot of moving pieces at this point.
Yeah, the HOT team really works with our unsheltered population to build relationships and really to talk to them about why they're shelter resistant. Sometimes it's that there's 100 other people in the building. Sometimes it's a trust issue that over a period of time can improve. I know that with the Johnson Street shelter, we have seen people come into shelter in the winter that the HOT team said wouldn't come into shelter for years. And they eventually have sought shelter at Johnson Street in the last couple of years just because of those relationships. The homeless outreach team also provides sack lunches and socks and gloves and other life essential needs to people who are living unsheltered, and then also work with our local businesses and neighbors. If somebody's like, there's someone who is hanging out outside my business, what do? I don't want to call police, or it's really not a police issue, then the homeless outreach team can come and not only visit with the person that's there and help them find the services that they need, but also talk a little bit and maybe destigmatize a little bit around houselessness and the individuals experiencing that with the business owners or the neighborhood. And then give them their card and say, if you have issues, give me a call anytime. And so they're not trained like clinicians like the mobile support team has. They're not medical professionals, but they're really just relationship builders in the community.
Great, thank you for that. I think it's just nice having that clarified. Council, we see a lot of information come through, so it really helps just giving us the frame of reference on this. Okay.
And can I just let Anna chime in real quick on the community care team piece, since it's a little bit more than medical.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just want to add that we do have that tenancy support component. So working with individuals to get into housing and retain housing, as we housing is healthcare. So definitely still tied to medical, but everything we do is in an effort to get into housing, just to clarify.
Thank you. And I think all of that relationship building it does all overlap and helps pull people forward, but then kind of different focuses within those categories. So, okay, I've got it. Thanks. Just spell it out for me. All right, I've got a list of hands that are raised here. So let's go to some questions. This is not an action item today. It's just an informational item, but it's really our chance to have a great discussion. So Jennifer Savage.
I just was wondering where the temporary safe outdoor space is currently located. And I think someone said that it may move. And so I was just wondering where it might go. And then also, as someone who's kind of new to all of this work, and it's such an amazing, like, coordinated system, I was wondering, Emily, if you might be willing to share your slides just so we're processing a lot of information super quickly. And so I would just love to be able to sort of dig in, particularly on that. There was one slide that looks like there's a progression, from people coming in at a certain point, they enter the system at a certain point, and they're sort of progressing potentially into housing. And so I would love to be able to take a look at that if at all possible.
Absolutely. We can absolutely share those. I think we can even get it linked to the agenda. I'll work with Claire on that. And in response to your question about the temporary safe outdoor space, so currently it's out by Buckhouse Bridge. So if you're going south towards Lolo, it'll be on your right as you're kind of going out of town. And that's where it's been since December of 2020. We're working on developing, there's a piece of land that's part of the Trinity development site off of Mullen that's unused. It's county land. And so working with the county on trying to utilize that piece of property and build out infrastructure. And Casey Gannon with the county, I don't think he's on anymore, but he's really leading the charge to try to build out that piece and figure out how we connect to utilities and all of those elements. And it's a bit of a complicated process and nothing is final yet, but that's what we're looking at right now.
Thank you.
Thanks. Kristen.
Thank you. So being a representative of Ward 6 and having a majority of the services or a lot of services in my ward, I'm already getting phone calls from folks who live on Roderick and Grove Street, which is, I don't know how far down from the Reserve Street encampment. I spoke to the HOT team this morning, but I guess I'm just, so what I'm going to work with Willis McCurdy. We're going to do an information session for folks about kind of what to do if you see somebody who's unhoused near your home, because a lot of times folks feel really threatened, and I'd like to start to pick that apart and say, look, just because you see someone doesn't mean that you're in imminent danger. But I guess my concern that I have, in talking with the HOT team this morning, and I just am blanking the fellow's name I spoke to this morning, is the lead guy. But he said, with the closing the Johnson Street shelter in a couple of weeks, we're gonna have 85 people looking for a house and a place to stay. And a lot of them are probably gonna end up in my ward up along the river. And what I found is that I guess I just want to try and figure out, and this is not anything about law enforcement, it's just like how do we encourage these folks to move along without them becoming criminal justice involved and or without needing, and again, this is absolutely nothing against the police department, it's just something, how do we get these folks to move along or provide opportunities for them to move along without kind of using a strong arm. I'm just super concerned really that I'm going to get a bunch of phone calls and not know what to say to folks, in all honesty. So I would love to see all of the folks coming out of the Johnson Street shelter finding a place to stay. And I would love to see them avoiding criminal justice involvement. And I also understand that neighbors are concerned, and we have riparian zones that are getting damaged when folks camp there. And it's just a really complicated situation, and I'm already getting phone calls. So I would appreciate some insight. Thank you.
Yeah, I can respond real quick and just say, I think you're speaking to the crux of all of the work that we're trying to do. I think that's what all of us are really focused on, is how do we support these folks and divert them away from criminal justice or all these systems, that they end up in the right places, because their needs are just so much greater and human centered, and there's just a lot more to the story. So I think that's the reason we have the homeless outreach team. That's the reason we have the community care team. That's the reason we have the mobile support team. That's the reason we have Rogers. We're trying to build the response around how do we help these folks, move them along, connect them to resources, share information about what will happen if they stay camping there and law enforcement does come, provide education, just all of these components to really wrap around the folks in our community who are unsheltered, and recognizing, we don't have enough beds right now for every single one of them. And so how do we really try to support them with housing problem solving and other really creative solutions, using things like our centralized housing solutions fund with one-time gap funding and those kinds of things to be able to, creatively solve a lot of issues that we don't have consistent solutions for at the current moment.
Can I ask a follow-up, please?
Well, I was gonna, if I can just clarify further, because so Emily, is there a point of contact who, if Kristen gets phone calls and emails, what should she do in terms of directing people? And is there a tiered response? Is that kind of what you're trying to get at, Kristen?
No, it's not. I guess my concern is that, I know who to call. I have empathy for these folks, and if I lived along the river, I'd probably have a completely different approach. But I have constituents who are super concerned. And I guess what I'm getting at, you did mention some community relationship and education pieces. Maybe that's what I'm asking. Like, can you elaborate a little bit more on the plan to work with community to educate them so that when they see an unhoused person, they don't automatically feel like they have to call the police? That's something that Willis McCurdy and I are going to work on together. I've got a little bit of background in this space, but education, because we're expecting these vulnerable, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but my take is that we expect a lot more out of these vulnerable populations than we do out of the people who have homes and jobs and support. And how do we educate the people who have home, jobs, and support to be more empathetic to our unhoused population? I feel like that's a critical issue at this point, while we're still trying to roll out all these supportive services. I would love to hear more on that space, if there's anything that you have to add to.
Yeah, so I think community education is something that we're always trying to do in all of our work in Reaching Home and all of our partners. Myth busting, there's tons of myths that kind of feed into that fear that's really based out of nothing, that we are often trying to break down. And there are materials related to that. We have the Engage Missoula page, which is a really good resource. I think it's a little bit underutilized, that has a lot of kind of those myth busting facts, the frequently asked questions about the things that we hear from community most often, that speak I imagine are similar to the things that you may be hearing from constituents. And there's information on that page. So that's probably like tangibly the best resource for education, but something that, I think all of us are trying to integrate into all of our communications and efforts in community meetings, community engagement. We also have started to develop resource sheets. We had one for the emergency winter shelter. We created one for the authorized campsite that really clearly break down, if your concern is related to this is who makes the most sense to call. And if it's this is who it makes the most sense. Really trying to, again, break down. It's not always 911. We have these other resources now, and these are how we can best support you if you have a concern or have an issue. So I think that's another actual tangible component that we're trying to get better at as well.
Great, thank you. And great question, Kristen. I appreciate that. Okay, Heidi West.
I remember last year when we had the update on the safe camping space, we were really excited because just a couple of people got housed. And I wanted to double check that I heard you correctly, that it was 49% of the people that utilized that space moved on to a more secure housing situation.
Yeah, 37 have been housed, but 49% includes the couple that have gone, two different individuals that have gone into inpatient treatment or that have self-resolved through employment or been reunited with their family. That creates the 49%. but there's 37 that have gone into housing.
And then I have a follow-up question. So of the 39 individuals that are housed, are people, I guess, needing to step through subsidized housing, or can they, are we seeing folks being able to enter into market rate housing as well from this site?
I can answer that. Yeah, so for the most part, a lot of them are going through the coordinated entry system. We work really well with them. We have 2 individuals that have been able to do it on their own without subsidized or walking through coordinated entry system. Some of them are doing this subsidized in a lot of like senior living, because we did work with a lot of folks that are over well into their 60s or higher. So it's just a multiple different ways of them being permanently housed. But some of them that have been housed now have the income to pay that 30%.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for providing a little bit more detail. I think that's the only question I have for now. Congratulations on running a really awesome program this year.
Daniel, next question.
Thanks. Yeah, I just had 2 quick questions. With the people like that are sleeping in their cars or staying in their cars, and I feel like we really need a safe parking space for people, or at least somewhere where they can't just like get tapped on their window and get a ticket or have to move or whatever else happens. So I think that's really just like one thing that I was just curious if there was any plans to have like a safe parking space, or if there is any safe parking areas. And then I just had a follow up.
It's a great question. I'm actually, I've been doing some research on safe parking programs across the country recently to explore how other places are doing it. Because I think, I mean, that's a need we've been hearing for a while, particularly for RVs and trailers, which in my initial research on safe parking places or safe parking programs in other communities, it's addressing more vehicles than it is RVs and trailers. So I'm not sure it's a direct translation to what our main challenge is, but that is something we're looking into. There's no set plan on developing it yet, but it's something we're starting to dig into to understand a little bit more and try to get a picture for what that looks like and how it's been successful in other areas. There have definitely been some programs in California and some other areas across the country that have gone well. And what I'm finding is typically it's not necessarily one designated area, one parking lot or something. It's typically like a business or a church or something will donate like three parking spots in their lot overnight that can be used for safe parking every night. And there's like a check-in process and an approval process. And so it's kind of scattered like that. But securing those spaces, making sure they're safe, that's a critical component as well. So anyway, there's no set plan yet. We are starting to look into it. It's definitely a challenge that I think we've been discussing city, county, community wide for a few years.
Thanks. And then the other thing, I was just curious, like if there's plans to add running water and electricity over to the authorized campsite. Like I know when the TSOS is getting moved, it sounds like we will likely have stuff like that there. So I was just wondering if there's any plans for the authorized campsite to have like those, or like shelter platforms, or some of the other things that residents are asking for. But I feel like a couple of the big ones would just be if we had a plan for running water and electricity. I was curious if you had any updates.
Casey, I see. I said you weren't on, and now I see your face. So do you mind responding?
Yeah, there is plans to bring water over to the ACS. The water main is quite a distance away, and currently, I think it's going through permitting, and neighbors bringing that water main over to their site. So that is hopefully being put in this summer/fall when they can get a contractor. So we're working with them to also bring water to the campground site. There is power at the site that's used for the security trailer and stuff like that. So yeah, those things are in the works to bring over to that site.
With the electricity side, I was just curious, like if that, it sounds like it's more for Rogers than like the residents. Is there a plan to make it to where like people can like plug in their phone or plug in a heater? Or...
Yeah, at this time there's not. Just I think now that we're bringing on someone to kind of help manage the site, we might explore something like that, but kind of the unregulation of it wasn't kind of feasible to just have open. We had that for a little bit and just kind of got abused and was causing lots of problems. So at this point, we don't have plans to provide electricity to the residents and their sites, but it's on the list of exploring and see how we can manageably do that safely.
Great, thank you. Okay, going down my list here, Amber Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And I know we're probably going to get tight to get on time here, so I'll be brief. I first just want to say I love this team. I love that you are all so passionate about this work, and just thank you for what you do for our community. It's a huge deal. I really appreciate also Jim's comments around kind of the ability to feel safe and feel like your belongings are safe in order to move forward. And I think safety for these residents is something that cannot be kind of understated, and the importance of them moving forward. So I guess this one is for, I don't know if it's for Emily or Jill, but when I attended the, I guess you would call it an open house, a walkthrough of the Johnson Street shelter before it opened this past season, you had some big posters out that were those myth busters. And I found them so compelling. I have some poor digital quality pictures of them. I took pictures of all of them because I thought they were just really compelling messages. And I think Ms. Jones was there as well. And we both were really struck by that. I'm wondering if, like, can we attach those somehow? Could we send them out to counselors? I really love those. So that's a request, I guess, not a question. And then I have a couple quick questions for the TSOS with is it that the expansion of it is, and I guess maybe this is for Jim, is the expansion of it like that you'll still have those 20 platforms plus up to 35 of these hard-sided shelters? Or, I mean, what is the total number that you would have out there under the current plan, and what is the timing for it?
Oh, Amber, I wish that was the case. No, we are on leased private property. Our lease is up out at Buckhouse Bridge at the end of May. We have verbal promise we can stay there longer. But no, we're on private leased property that the landowners have ideas for as well. So no, we'll just have those 25 to 30 at the new site.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair, may I have an additional question?
Go ahead.
And then at the authorized camping site, is there room for expansion there? And I guess kind of adding to that, and maybe you did this a few weeks ago, but what is the data that we have, from the HOT team, from the CARE team, on kind of how many more people in the last year, what the percentage of number increase to those experiencing houselessness is? Do we have any sense of that as we talk about our need to expand these different programs?
So briefly on the authorized campsite expansion piece, that's something we've talked about. It's still kind of in conversation, but we're very hesitant to expand it for a variety of reasons, including management of that site. Something we know across the board in all kinds of communities that are doing these kinds of ad hoc camping sites or tiny home sites is that size really does matter. And if it gets too big, it's no longer safe for residents and is no longer, it needs a much bigger staff capacity. And yeah, no matter how much staffing you have, a bigger site just becomes that security piece for residents, knowing their belongings are safe, all of that. It's much harder to do when the site is bigger. So we are hesitant to expand for that reason. There's infrastructure pieces as well that Casey is looking into and has been. So it's not, it's something that we're in conversation about. We've heard the curiosity from a variety of people and are kind of exploring it, but also with a good deal of hesitancy. And then related to data, I can't speak to those numbers right now. I don't have them pulled up in front of me. But if you are interested in numbers comparing last year to this year, we have quite a few data sources. Missoula Organization of Realtors has our HIMSS data from 2017, 2018, I think, on some slides, and it shows the change in numbers. Anecdotally, I think we definitely are seeing a steady increase. I don't think the increase is like hugely significant this year from last year, but we definitely are seeing an increase as the whole country is, with the effects of COVID and economic impacts and rising home prices and all of these things, inflation, that are really just making it extremely difficult for folks who already were unhoused and folks who were precariously housed. And now with all of the different challenges around the country, that situation has become harder.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Thanks so much. Definitely want to echo the sentiments from my other colleagues about what a huge success this is. I know that there's a momentum component to all of this, and having been on council for 5 years, it's little by little, but the fact that there's now synergy amongst all of these programs and coordination, and we're really starting to see, for the person who's housed that one person, it makes all the difference in their lives. But as a community in total, starting to see some of these numbers, I mean, just hats off to all of you, especially Jim and April. The temporary safe outdoor shelters in the county, but it's at this end of the city border. And there was a lot of concerns from the neighborhood about it coming in, and none of those concerns have bore out. And what really has happened is a lot of people's lives have been impacted in a really positive way. So thank you so much to that. Kind of talking about the budgeting piece, I mean, not in this presentation, and I don't know if at some point as we start to move into the budget season, it would be nice to see kind of how some of these investments and the impact it has made, and how we continue to invest it. I know the mayor, when he put out his budget letter last year, really highlighted the sort of the increase in investment in a lot of these social services that we were making in that budget when we passed it, and the impacts that they were going to have, and how it was not so much a lot of the municipal budgeting things that people necessarily think of, but really how it was more thinking of kind of the people as well as the places in that budget. So I'd love to see kind of a presentation for that, if in preparation for the budget, we can work with Madam Chair for that. And then the other piece that is out there that I'm excited about, and if you could just super quickly touch on that, because I know there's other questions, but the Trinity project and the Villaggio project are, if we could all wave a magic wand, would all be open right now, but they are not, but they're coming online soon. And so how does that work into the continuum of care and housing? And is there, and then how is the navigation space? Because I know one of the things we budgeted for in last year's budget was a coordinator for that space out at Trinity for the services. If you could just give a quick little highlight to that, because I think it also highlights, all the great work that's being done and how we're hoping to expand it, given the additional resources that are hopefully coming online sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Trinity project will be 202 units. 172 of those will be affordable rental units, intended for Missoula's workforce and intended to be accessible to those making 60% of the area median income or below. And then 30 of those units will be permanent supportive housing units. And then there will, of course, also be the navigation center. And the Villaggio, I believe, is 200 units of rentals that are affordable to a similar wage bracket. And the navigation center, we are in the process of securing a service provider for that space and figuring out the staffing structure. So I don't have a final update except to say that we're in conversation and working on it as we speak. And hope to have an update in the coming months. But yes, those facilities will be open relatively soon, within the next year. I believe Villaggio and the Cooley site of Trinity, which Trinity is split into 2 sites, are predicted for end of this year. And all of this is flexible. Building costs are expensive. Things are changing always, but that's the current prediction, I think. And then the Mullen site of Trinity is predicted for spring of 2023. So relatively soon in the grand scheme of a timeline. And yeah, I think will be huge resources. The Navigation Center will hopefully become a hub of the coordinated entry system. The permanent supportive housing units are so needed in our community, and of course will be a really good resource for those who are most vulnerable in the coordinated entry system and that fused population. And then just the increase in affordable rental units is huge across our entire community, and I think that's going to be really, really valuable.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, may I have a second question? Yeah, thank you. So I realize that the winter shelter is closing April 18th. And I guess my concern is looking forward into summer as we are seeing the effects of climate change in our community and the increasingly hot summers and the increasingly smoky summers. They have a different sort of health effect, especially for the most vulnerable in our community. And I'm hoping for a very rainy, cold spring that leads to a not smoky summer, but at last I'm not in control of that. So is there any conversations around if it gets really bad for health or air quality for setting, are there conversations about setting up a place that has safe air or indoor air, especially for the folks who will possibly be sleeping outside because of the lack of the winter shelter and just, as you said, the change in season and how the shift of folks and transitional housing are. So
yeah, it's a great question. There aren't any plans right now. I think it's something we've started to talk a little bit more about in the last year or so, as we've discovered that unfortunately severe weather in Montana is no longer in the winter anymore. No longer only in the winter anymore. So yes, it's something we're talking about. There are some early conversations, but there is not a set plan at this time.
Great question. Okay, we've got a couple more questions and we've got about 9 minutes left. Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. This meeting actually came at a really good time. I kind of have a follow-up on what Kristen was saying. I just got a voicemail from somebody saying that there looks to be an encampment starting up off of Grove Street near the old trestle tracks off of the Clark Fork River, I believe. And I guess when I get calls like that, I mean, obviously now I can tell you guys about it, but if we weren't in the middle of a meeting when I got this phone call, who would I call about that?
Concerns about an encampment?
Yeah, like if somebody calls me and they say, oh, there's an encampment starting, like, do I call it the hot team or which one do I call?
Yeah, so it's a little bit situational. There are a few different folks you could connect with. You can connect with me. I'm an easy source to kind of triage it or direct it into that urban camping group. If it's on, it kind of depends on whose land it's on. So that dictates the responsibility. If it's in a public right of way, it's more code. If it's on parks land, it's more parks. If it's on private land, it's the responsibility of the resident. So, and if it's a new encampment that we didn't know about, and then we want to connect them with HOT. So I can be an initial first contact, and I can also touch base with you offline about other, kind of the phone tree for the best based on what the situation is.
So thank you very much. So I guess I'll take this opportunity. This is me contacting you about that phone call, and I'll reach out to the person who called me as well.
Yeah, if it's an email or if there's more context, I'm not going to remember all of that right now. So if you could send it to me,
I'll email you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Follow up with an email. That's a good idea. Okay, thanks. Okay, last we have Jordan Hess.
Thanks. I really appreciate the presentation, and I just am so grateful for the work of all of the service provider partners. It really embodies our values as a community to try to lift up every member of our community and make sure that that folks have a safe place to stay and live with dignity. I think that, I guess this it's kind of hard to see incremental change when it's happening, but if we look back, maybe a couple of years ago when we had kind of cobbled together this ramshackle winter shelter at the Mountain Line Transfer Center because it was below zero. That was in response to an emergent need, and we've gotten better at winter shelter every year. And I think that's the percentage of folks that are housed this year is a great metric on that. The fact that we had 0 deaths, known deaths from exposure is a testament to that. But obviously, Emily, you brought up some really good points around displacement with folks who are precariously housed, with lingering issues from COVID. And I guess my question is that the city and the county appropriate funds. And so what would be say the three most impactful investments that we could make in the next 1 to 3 years to make an impact and to move the needle?
That's a big question. I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that right now. I will say we are, I appreciate the question. Yeah, I think it's a great question for sure. And something we're thinking about as well as we think about the budget season. One of the projects that we are working on right now is finding a consultant, a evaluation partner to do an evaluation of the 10-year plan, which in my mind is really digging into all of the work that's been done in the last 10 years and helping to orient us to successes and gaps and challenges and just what this work needs to look like now, given the housing landscape as it is now versus how it was 10 years ago. So I think that evaluation project that will probably go on for the duration of the next year will set us up to be able to answer that question really well. Yeah, but I would need to think more about it to answer it right now.
And maybe a follow-up if I may, and I guess it's Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I guess it's something that I think we need to continually think about as a body, that these solutions are expensive and they're important, and and we're asking, what would it take to keep a winter shelter open when it's closing in 10 days? And we need to be asking, what would it take next year on April 18th to make sure that the winter shelter doesn't close? Or what would it take? How do we get to a point where we have a year-round low barrier shelter? How do we get to a point where we have the services that we need? And so I guess I wasn't fully expecting an answer, but let's keep the conversation going about what are the most critical investments in the next in the short term that would move the needle on this.
Madam Chair, I have a comment on that, if possible.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that is so important because I think of all the costs that it's taken to stand up, just from my end, the TSOS. I would hate to see that go away and then in a year or so, 2 years, try to do it again, right? So helping these to be sustainable is just, it's really on our radar as well. It's one of those things that keeps you up at night and keeps you going during the day because we don't want to take any steps backwards. So thank you for thinking of that.
Yeah, Jordan, I think it's a huge topic, and it was kind of the last comment I had because all of my other questions, frankly, have been asked by other people. But over the last few years, the silver lining in this pandemic, difficult as it all has been, there have been several silver linings, but one of them has been having the federal money come into our community so that we could do these different interventions and meet people where they are at, which I think is the definition of equity, truly meeting them where they are at and creating these different programs. And I can tell you, but for that federal money coming in, we could never have done it. We would have nipped a little bit here, a little bit over here, not really moved the needle at all, and not had the successes that we're seeing now, but for that federal money. So that is going to be the ongoing question of the year, is how do we figure out to keep this sustainable? And we've got examples of communities, especially in the Pacific Coast, where the problem got away from them. The issue they have so many issues in terms of houseless people who are not housed, and it got away from them, and it's really, really hard to address them. So we've got so many good things going on in Missoula. How are we going to keep this sustainable? Okay, I've got 2 more hands raised and 2 minutes. So Heidi and then Merta, and we are ending this meeting on time today. I've had a very bad track record lately, so we're going to do it.
So I think my question probably doesn't require an answer right now, but I know staffing challenges were a huge issue to running and maintaining these outdoor spaces, or any of the spaces, the shelter spaces. And so I think it would be worth maybe during budget discussions, maybe revisiting that just to see how we, can budget better or can plan better to be able to make sure they're staffed and it's not so stressful for our peer providers. And I guess another question I have that I would love answered in the future is maybe some takeaways from COVID that we would keep instituting, whether, for example, like spacing people more, brought people into the system that maybe weren't comfortable with, how things were laid out previously. Just if there's some like lessons learned through these practices we had that were forced on us and maybe made things better. So I guess I would love to hear that in the future as well.
Great, thanks, Heidi. And before we go to Merita, I just want to note if there's any public comment, we've got one person attending. I believe they're from the press, but please raise your hand if you want to give public comment. Seeing no hand raised, we'll go back for the last question to wrap it up. Merita.
Thank you. I am more than a question, is really a comment. You all do amazing work, and my hope is that this can be better communicated to the community because you need to toot your horn a little bit louder. There's a lot of information out there that people don't know is being done by the city. A lot of work, a lot of really challenging work. And Jordan mentioned that solutions are expensive, but I think it's also good to remember that doing nothing is more expensive. And so I think that budgeting appropriately for solutions is the responsible thing to do. And as we get closer to budget time, I think we need to think about that too, that allocating funds for solutions is expensive. It's significantly more expensive to not do anything. And we have saved a ton of money to Missoula residents by putting in solutions that we have in place right now and for executing those solutions so well, the way that you have done it so far. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And one last comment, and then we will wrap this up. And I just want to go back. Amber Sherrill had mentioned the posters that were up at the Johnson Street open house. Those were excellent informational posters that I think they do a great deal in terms of communicating. And I just wanted to throw out, I don't know if those can periodically be put up at the farmer's market or somewhere downtown or out at the mall for periods of time, because I think that's a great tool that should be used. So wanted to put that out there. And thank you everyone for coming today and for your participation. I know this is a bit of a long meeting, but I feel like we really covered a lot. And thanks so much, Emily, all of the staff and all of our stakeholders for coming today and for all of the work that you do. And we will stand adjourned. Thanks.